Nobody knew her name, but everyone recognized her by that calm stare, as if she carried a profound secret. She wore her waitress apron like a discreet armor, hiding scars only she understood. Night after night, she walked between crystal tables and exquisite dishes, hearing whispers that treated her as mere decoration. There was something heavy in her silence, a shadow of loss blending with the clink of champagne glasses. Behind that facade of serenity, she was bracing herself for something far greater than any single work shift. The luxurious dining room staged countless untold stories, yet hers was still waiting to be revealed. And in that moment, an invisible tension hovered in the air, ready to explode. Amid unrestrained luxury, there was a boy everyone seemed to ignore. He sat motionless in his motorized wheelchair, large, melancholy eyes scanning every crystal reflection. Some laughed at his quiet presence, treating him as a mere ornament in the opulent scene. But a hidden light shone in those eyes, something that whispered of an unseen battle. He watched the preserved dance steps in old videos, seeking courage to dream beyond his physical barriers. In that impenetrable-looking hall, his desire for freedom was a courageous whisper. He extended his hand toward the woman serving him, as if spotting a bridge between two lonely souls. And in that fleeting moment, the possibility of an instant of hope became more vivid than anything around. She hesitated, her heart softly stepping over the barriers of protocol. Each second seemed to accelerate, as if destiny's clock marked the tempo of a secret melody. The restaurant's manager, a symbol of unshakable authority, watched from afar, ready to intervene. The menus trembled lightly in the patron's hands, reflecting the charged atmosphere. A soft jazz note arose, insinuating that something might crack that place's icy veneer. The woman lifted her chin, took a deep breath, and for an instant allowed herself to believe the rules could be challenged. It was as if every surrounding gaze made a silent pact. Accept the improbable. And in a move nobody expected, she prepared to change everything. They said the world of the rich tolerated no deviation from conduct. Rules were sacred there, and any audacity was seen as an affront. But there was something in that woman's hands that spoke louder than protocols. Compassion. She knew that ignoring that boy's yearning would make him invisible once again. And when she decided to step forward, the silence deafened everyone. Every spoon tapping a plate sounded like an accusation. For a brief second, rich and powerful found themselves forced to confront an error they hadn't realized they were committing. The clash between what was right and what was acceptable took on the shape of a dignified struggle. And in that apex of courage, the promise of an instant of redemption emerged. No one expected a simple dance step to hide so much power. It was a controversial statement, a waitress's humility and a boy's hope capable of shaking an empire of appearances. The clink of crystal mingled with the beating hearts of all who watched in a shared rhythm. Each second seemed to invite a choice: maintain comfortable silence or dive into another's pain. The scent of spices and expensive perfume blended with the whisper of a faith no one dared name. And amid stifled sighs, a desire was born to keep one's eyes fixed on that scene. It was the moment everyone realized the story beginning here would not be like the others. You are about to witness a plot where rules collide with courage, where pain merges with swift redemption, and where dance emerges as a healing ritual. Ask yourself, how far can a simple gesture rewrite lives? Could the greatest injustice occur amidst opulence? And if an invisible woman challenges all you know, what will remain to believe in? Prepare to find out, because in this story, no one walks away unscathed.
Before diving into this exciting story, we want to make sure you don't miss out on any of our incredible content. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, now is the perfect time to do so. By subscribing, you'll become a valued member of our growing community, where we share amazing stories, insightful lessons, and much more. Don't wait any longer. Hit that subscribe button now and join us on this amazing journey.
The clock read 8:03 p.m. as Valerie Johnson pushed through the revolving doors of Le Coeur d'Espoir. The soft scrape of the marble floor mixed with the hurried footsteps of the waitstaff. She straightened her dark apron, catching the intoxicating scent of wine and spices. Her eyes immediately captured the duality of the dining room, crystal chandeliers reflecting light like stars. Around her, the clinking of glassware and the contained murmur of patrons created a somber symphony. Valerie lifted her chin with quiet dignity, though inside a knot of longing tightened her chest. Each of her movements was precise, almost invisible but filled with a silent strength. Some guests laughed softly, ignoring her calm expression, as she passed by. She ignored their indifferent gazes and made her way toward the reserved tables. The night promised to be long, but she sensed nothing would remain the same as the previous shift. A group of executives in dark suits debated somber deals in a corner. Elias, a partner at a brokerage, lifted his eyes and averted them when he saw Valerie walking by. Tables stood aligned like troops in formation, pristine under the gentle light. Valerie delivered exquisite dishes with the calm of someone who knew every movement by heart. Her fingers touched the cold porcelain before placing the plates without hesitation. One guest sipped champagne as if trying to erase an inner void. She noticed the sparkle of ostentatious jewelry, a glaring contrast to her simplicity. Valerie's melancholy blended with the chandelier's shine, casting a musical shadow. She heard a contained sigh, half boredom, half admiration, as eyes drifted to her. Each step she took seemed like a whisper of hope amid others' opulence. She moved through the row of tables. She lifted her hand and let her cross pendant slip under the apron. Memories of therapeutic dance classes surfaced like a living scar. Waves of flashbacks flooded her mind. Children tracing the floor with worn ballet slippers. The smell of peeling paint mixed with the soft music she used to teach them to spin. She felt a knot in her throat remembering Tiffany's first smile. The pain of losing her daughter had turned into the strength to keep faith alive. She returned. Her gaze to the present, took a deep breath and continued serving. A distant piano began to play notes that seemed to whisper promises. Valerie's breath slowed, as if each chord anchored her feet to the ground. The scar of loss allowed her to see beauty in what others considered mere luxury. On the other side of the dining room, Ethan Sullivan sat motionless in his wheelchair. His large, sorrowful eyes seemed unable to find relief amidst the crystal. Around him, his hands rested gently on the metallic supports, almost inaudible in their stillness. Behind him, Richard reviewed notes on a tablet, ignoring his son as if he were invisible. The piano music grew more intense but did not reach the boy's isolated heart. Valerie crossed the path behind him, their eyes meeting for an instant. In that second, they both felt the same vibration of hope and contained fear. She offered a discreet smile, extending a hint of warmth in that icy environment. He averted his gaze, almost ashamed, yet something within him kindled a spark. Valerie pressed on, knowing that nothing would ever be the same after that brief encounter. At the far end of the dining hall, near an improvised stage, a collective sigh swept through. The stage had become a point of tension, spotlights casting dramatic shadows. A discreet charity event was about to begin there, and everyone awaited something grand. The violinists tuned their instruments, their strings vibrating like hearts ready to burst. Valerie shivered as she saw the spotlight illuminating the red velvet drape. There was something almost sacrificial about that stage adorned with white petals. She imagined each petal as a promise of transformation for someone that night. The murmur grew louder and teacups were raised in a silent toast. Then, a slight movement at the corner of the stage caught her and Ethan's attention. Both held their breath, as if sensing something greater would unfold there. Guests turned toward the stage, whispering with curiosity. Some leaned back in velvet chairs, exchanging looks of expectation. The waitstaff paused their flawless rhythm to watch, in silence. Valerie stood firm, her heart pounding like war drums. Ethan gripped the wheelchair handle, nervous yet showing an unprecedented courage. For the first time, he dared to look directly at the spotlights. A heavy silence hung over the hall, broken only by Valerie's steady breathing. The chandelier's glow seemed to pale compared to that moment's electricity. Every detail, the wine's shimmer, the satin ribbon's sheen, took on new meaning. What would happen next would not be just a show, but a promise of redemption. Valerie felt her abdomen pulse strongly, as if her blood pleaded to run. She recalled the silent prayers she offered at the end of each shift, seeking faith and courage. There was something sacred in that moment, a silent summons to act. The stage light gently illuminated her cross pendant, creating a faint halo. Echoes of invisible footsteps resonated in her mind, reminding her of past promises. The contrast between tense silence and muffled cutlery sounds created a cinematic scene. That silent choreography of emotions hung in the air, inviting everyone to witness it. Valerie's breathing became rhythmic, as if she were rehearsing an inner dance. Tears of empathy welled in her eyes, but she held them back to remain composed. The tension was set, and the next move would be the first step of a new journey. Muffled click sounded as someone pressed the projector switch in the back. The music swelled again, filling every corner of the restaurant with warm notes. Valerie kept her eyes fixed on the stage, anxious for what would unfold. Ethan lifted his head, his large eyes reflecting a blend of hope and fear. Richard raised, an eyebrow suspicious, trying to understand what was coming. The murmur returned, but no sound compared to the racing of their hearts. The red curtain began to move like a skin peeling back to reveal a scar. Pain and expectation intertwined in that all-or-nothing instant. Each guest held their breath as if the world had paused to watch. Something on that stage would forever change the destinies of Valerie and young Ethan, and the silence screamed that promise. Ethan sat motionless in his wheelchair, his fingers trembling over the buttons in a nervous whisper. Soft lights from the dining room cast patterns on the polished floor, inviting him to imagine new worlds. He lifted his gaze and saw Valerie, approaching, balancing glittering glasses on her tray. A shiver ran down his spine as he remembered the therapeutic dance videos he watched in secret, as if they were portals to another life. Slowly, he extended his right hand toward Valerie, summoning the breeze that blew through an open window. His heart raced as he heard the click of his nails against the chair's edge. "Could you dance with me?" he murmured, his voice trembling with the fear of punishment. Valerie felt each word strike her chest like a petal landing on dark water, reverberating in waves of tenderness and doubt. The piano, attuned to the moment, fell silent, waiting to be shaped by Ethan's gesture. All eyes turned to the boy, mixing curiosity, suspicion, and a hint of restrained compassion. Valerie hesitated for a moment that felt like an eternity, the cross pendant vibrating against her skin to the rhythm of her racing heart. Behind her, the clinking of utensils froze, echoing like a shockwave in the still air. She recalled Marcus's strict rules echoing through the halls. No distractions during service. Yet when she looked into Ethan's eyes, she saw a world of weathered courage, as if he had traversed thousands of miles within a child's mind. Her entire body tensed, torn between the desire to bring joy to the boy and the fear of consequences. A gentle tremor coursed through her fingers, as though memories of dance classes formed an invisible choreography. The audience divided, muffled, whispers and scornful glances, but also subtle nods of encouragement. She turned her body, her back straight, as if preparing to step onto a precarious chessboard. The music resumed soft jazz notes, inviting movement without forcing the moment. Valerie inhaled deeply, sensing that the world held its breath alongside her. The unanswered question hung in the air. Would she dare to break protocol to fulfill that silent request? As she slipped off her apron and placed her foot onto the gleaming floor, the dining room exploded into reverent silence. Ethan reached out, his tearful eyes reflecting the gentle light like lanterns, unveiling hidden truths. Valerie felt the floor tremble beneath her, as though the entire restaurant swayed with each step. The clinking of glasses faded into the background, overshadowed by hearts pounding in unison. When she took Ethan's small hand, she noticed the coldness of his skin contrasted with the warmth blossoming in her own body. She leaned down, capturing his gaze, and whispered words that seemed born from her own prayers. Trust me, my dear." Ethan smiled, liberated from a shame that had bound him for far too long. He lifted the wheelchair with a slight push, as if preparing to soar, and the entire room exhaled in unison. Valerie sensed the sweet scent of childhood mingled with the hope rising in the air. The piano began its melody, gentle and resolute, inviting them into a silent orbit of possibility. As Valerie's toes matched the rhythm of the soft tune, Ethan let out a stifled laugh, barely audible but potent, like a breeze breaking a tense quiet. Their improvised choreography took shape. She guided the pace, and he allowed himself to be moved beyond the stillness of wheels. Crystal chandeliers splashed shimmering light across each turn, creating a dance of light and shadow. The patrons froze, involuntary witnesses to a moment that defied any dining protocol. Marcus's cold sweat appeared on his forehead as he emerged from the kitchen. Startled by Valerie's audacity, he strode forward, his shoes echoing on the marble floor like hammer blows. Waitstaff exchanged nervous glances, momentarily abandoning their facades of indifference. Valerie felt eyes etch her chest, judged and applauded at once. With every note, the silence became a living entity, enveloping Ethan and her in an intimate cocoon. The dance transformed the restaurant's opulence into something secondary, surrendering to a choreography of redemption. When the final chords approached, Valerie guided Ethan to the center of the room, where he paused as if floating above his wheels. Their eyes met in a silent pact. She would gift him a moment of freedom, and he would return an ember of hope. Then Marcus emerged from the crowd, advancing with authority, and the music cut off like a stifled cry. The clinking of silverware resumed, now heavy, like chains snapping shut around the scene. Marcus opened his mouth to reprimand Valerie publicly, but a guest in a dark suit rose and applauded, an unexpected thaw in the sterile tension. The silence shifted to an embarrassed admiration. Valerie felt her chest burn with relief and apprehension, unsure if her gesture would be punished or lauded. Ethan exhaled, releasing a tear of contained joy. The improvised stage had seemed like an altar, and they both knew nothing would ever be the same. A lingering question remained. What would Marcus's verdict be? As the heavy clink of silverware echoed through the void left by the music, a murmur rose from the surrounding tables. "Did you see that? It was beautiful. I never imagined something like that in such an upscale restaurant." Glances flicked between patrons, charged with tension. Some embraced the gesture, others whispered that Valerie had shown off. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, letting gratitude anchor him. Valerie pressed a hand gently on his shoulder, feeling the nervous tremor beneath his thin skin. Like an island in a turbulent sea, she lifted her chin with dignity, accepting responsibility for her actions. Rumors from coworkers seeped in like poison, curious and resentful. She realized that her story would take unpredictable turns. The silence forming around them was a promise of either ruin or redemption. The piano resumed its gentle melody, not in peace, but with a veiled tension in each note. Valerie sensed Ethan's breath next to her, a whisper of faith caught in every chord. And so the chapter closed with the suspended question: can grace be found amidst authority that suppresses a child's light? Valerie replaced her apron, feeling Marcus's gaze pierce her spine. He approached, each step weighted with contained reproach. His austere face, highlighted by indirect lighting, accentuated wrinkles of frustration. "Ms. Johnson," Marcus said in a low voice, heavy with authority, "what made you think that was a good idea?" His words fell like heavy stones upon the still vibrating scene. Valerie gripped the tray with her left arm, drawing strength from the silent faith that had always guided her. Her gaze found Ethan's, and she saw in him a promise of courage to face what lay ahead. "I wanted to give that boy a moment of life beyond his chair," she replied, her voice trembling, "because he deserves more than invisible wings." Marcus's irrational silence settled in like a cold eclipse that obscured every reaction. His eyes glinted with conflict as deep as Valerie's own. Finally, he turned away, muttering, We'll address this later. Tension spiked, for no one knew if that later meant forgiveness or condemnation. With each passing second, the dining room felt like a chessboard of unpredictable glances. Some patrons pivoted in their seats, as if imprinting the scene onto their memories. Valerie stood motionless, tray held firmly, feeling every exhale from the hall. Ethan, still seated, felt his world quake beneath his wheels, as if each improvised step had shattered invisible chains around his soul. A murmur of hope began to spread, growing between surprised voices and misty eyes. The waitstaff, once rigid, now watched her with newfound respect. The woman who dared to disobey held an ancient courage. Meanwhile, Marcus retreated, leaving behind a trail of doubt and uncertain fates. The piano's gentle melody filled the space again, but not in peace. There was a hidden tension in each note. Valerie sensed Ethan's breath at her side, a breath of faith that the piano captured in every chord. And so, the chapter ended with a lingering question. Could grace truly be found amid authority that dims a child's light? Valerie kept Ethan's hand clasped in hers as they slowly spun across the brightly lit dining room. Each improvised step caused the chandelier's reflections to scatter across the floor like tiny constellations. The piano played soft jazz chords, bathing the scene in an almost sacred atmosphere. Ethan leaned forward, surrendering to the sensation of weight temporarily lifted from his shoulders. Patrons, once absorbed in their own universes, now watched them as if witnessing a ritual. Suddenly, Marcus stormed into the room, his shoes echoing like hammers striking a tomb. He raised his voice, cold and authoritative, demanding that Valerie return to serving immediately. The word protocol dripped from his lips like a blade slicing through the moment. Valerie felt her pulse quicken, but held Ethan's gaze to conceal her fear. She knew this moment transcended any rule of the restaurant. A murmur erupted among the patrons, split between outrage and silent support. Some whispered they had never seen such tenderness in a place so cold. Others sneered at the audacity. The waitstaff recoiled instinctively, their faces etched with judgment and hesitation. Valerie squeezed Ethan's hand tighter, feeling his heartbeat echo in her own. She took a deep breath, recalling the stifled sobs of prayer that filled her nights after losing her daughter. There was something in Ethan that mirrored her wounded courage, the same flame that once made her a therapeutic dance teacher. Marcus took a step forward, his gaze mercilessly drilling into Valerie like a sword. She felt the floor tremble beneath her, as if the entire restaurant questioned her choice. Ethan smiled at her, offering a spark of hope that ignited within her. Valerie realized that if she backed down now, she would shatter the veil of freedom that moment offered the boy. Marcus's fingers brushed against Valerie's arm as he tugged at the hem of her apron. The sensation sent an electric shock through her spine. "Ms. Johnson, put that choreography away and get back to work," he snarled, suffocating the jazz notes. Valerie felt a lump in her throat, as though his words wanted to drown her purpose. Ethan froze, his eyes wide in silent plea, begging for one more step. The piano's opening chords turned into torturous notes, marking each second of mounting tension. Valerie's gaze dropped to her cross pendant, remembering the promises whispered in faith-filled nights. She leaned slightly toward Marcus, seeking dialogue amidst the chaos. "Maybe you don't understand what this means to him," she said firmly, her voice trembling. Marcus narrowed his eyes, taken aback by the woman daring to challenge his authority. The entire room held its breath, awaiting the manager's response. Marcus swallowed hard, surprised by Valerie's direct reply, which contrasted with her usual meek demeanor. He coughed, staring at the floor first, as though seeking courage to speak. A guest in the back rose indignantly and fixed Marcus with a glare. "In what world is a child suffering tantamount to breaking rules?" The clinking of glasses sounded like a cry of solidarity with that anonymous voice. Marcus visibly wobbled, his rigid facade cracking for a moment. Valerie, not taking her eyes off Ethan, offered a faint smile, feeling the quiet power of collective silence. The room felt like a sea of conflicting pressures where every breath mattered. Ethan drew a deep breath and reaffirmed his desire, prompting the piano to resume its inviting melody. Valerie sensed hope's fragrance fill her nostrils, filling every cell of her body. The final decision loomed: obey protocol or honor the promise of freedom for this child. Marcus took an exasperated step forward, lifting his chin in an attempt to reassert control. The echo of his shoe resonated all the way to the kitchen where cooks peeked anxiously. "I cannot allow this," he stammered, his voice shaky as he stared at Valerie's face. She remained composed, though her feet nearly betrayed her steadiness. Ethan let out a soft moan of desperation, clutching the music as though it were the last lifeline. Valerie closed her eyes and discreetly touched her cross pendant, praying for strength. The storm in Marcus's gaze revealed an internal struggle as fierce as her own. Fury rose behind his words, corroding any chance of sudden reconciliation. Yet the silent presence of the patrons undermined the manager's authority. The piano darkened its notes, an omen that the turning point was near. In the hush that followed, Marcus's choice hovered like a blade suspended over everyone. In an unexpected surge, Valerie raised her voice above Marcus's chest, projecting with resolve. "He just wants to dance." Her words triggered a collective tremor. Marcus's gaze flickered to Ethan, who cringed slightly, uncertain but hopeful. Tension crystallized in an instant, as if even the air refused to move. Then Marcus straightened, turning abruptly to stand against a mirror at the room's far, and his reflection showed a man torn between preserving appearances and honoring another's pain. Valerie felt her chest flame with compassion, wishing that this moment could melt ancient wounds. Ethan, meanwhile, relaxed ever so slightly, sensing that something had shifted beyond Marcus's cold stare. Patrons held their breath as they awaited the manager's final verdict. It was then that the music swelled into a triumphant chord, heralding the response that would soon follow. Marcus lifted his head, his eyes still glistening with inner conflict, and said in a low voice, "Fine. But then you go back to that table. Understood?" Valerie nodded, feeling the weight of that promise in his words. The guests collectively exhaled, releasing the tension that hovered like a storm cloud. Ethan beamed and his wheels turned slightly in relief, as if reclaiming a lost rhythm. Valerie lifted her chin, letting discreet tears trail down her cheeks. The music intensified, celebrating the moment as though a light had broken through a long tunnel. Their hands warmed each other's, sharing the silent euphoria pulsing through them. Marcus retreated, fully aware that this victory transcended any restaurant rule. The makeshift stage now carried a deeper significance. It had become an arena for a fight for human dignity. The chapter closed with the promise of even deeper reverberations to come. As the melody echoed, murmurs began to spread among the waitstaff. Some exchanged amazed glances, while others looked away, unable to face the scene unfolding. Valerie returned her apron, her heart lightened but aware the real battle was far from over. Ethan leaned forward, his face illuminated by the thrill of an instant rebirth. At the back, Marcus watched from a distance, arms crossed, biting his lower lip in a tension of remorse and newfound respect. The piano's gentle notes gave way to the clinking of glasses and the rising buzz. Valerie felt the lingering pulse of emotion, like waves crashing through a broken dam. Destiny made it clear that forbidden step would open doors or cast even larger shadows. The final lingering question filled the air: which chains would break or be reforged after this small act of defiance? As Marcus raised his hand to summon security, Valerie squeezed Ethan's hand, imparting calm to him. The intermittent flicker of chandeliers cast patterns on the marble floor like suppressed lightning, signaling the storm brewing. Patrons split into two groups, those softly clapping in recognition of her courage and those scowling, lamenting the breach of flawless protocol. Among the waitstaff, venomous whispers surfaced. "Is this how she repays a restaurant that keeps her livelihood?" pondered a cynical young waiter. Valerie, feeling stares pierce her back, lifted her chin as though drawing strength from deep roots. Ethan sat still, yet his eyes shimmered with resolve to be more than a wheelchair label. The jazz piano looped softly, reminding everyone that the fight for respect could not end here. The clinking of utensils resumed, but felt distant, muffled by palpable tension. In the background, security approached, their footsteps echoing like anxious hearts. The atmosphere sensed an imminent clash. The next move would define who held power in this hall. When two security guards flanked Marcus, Valerie felt Ethan's breath quicken, as if he instinctively knew courage was required. The entire room held its breath. Even the piano ceased its notes, plunging the scene into a sharper, starker silence. Security advanced toward Valerie, each step resonating in onlookers' hearts. She remained upright, her hands tacitly clasping Ethan's, shielding him with all the quiet strength she possessed. "Ms. Johnson, you need to step back immediately," announced one guard, his voice reverberating like restrained thunder. Some patrons squirmed uncomfortably, sensing the weight behind that command. Valerie raised her gaze and met the guards, eyes feeling tears threatened to betray both her vulnerability and her resolve. "I will not step aside," she replied firmly. "Not until everyone understands that a boy deserves to dance without judgment." Murmurs swelled. Is she really not going to back down? Does he deserve this much? That instant became a mirror reflecting unspoken injustices projected onto the restaurant's luxurious canvas. As security exchanged uncertain glances, Ethan offered Valerie a timid smile, reminding her of their silent pact. The chandelier reflections formed small sparkling patches on his shirt collar, uncertain stars in a cloudy sky. Valerie felt her inner scar pulsate, recalling her daughter's frail body during dance sessions, steady as she pirouetted. One guard raised his voice. "Ma'am, please return to your station or be escorted out." His tone was respectful, but carried a veiled threat. Ethan lifted his head and, with a voice trembling between fear and determination, declared, "She gave me something I thought impossible, hope." Silence settled like a dense veil, broken only by the echo of the trapped piano. Patrons, shocked, turned to Ethan in a mixture of compassion and astonishment. Valerie sensed hope ignite as she witnessed the billionaire's son speak so truthfully. Marcus, clearly embarrassed, averted his gaze while security slowly withdrew, torn between orders and the power of that moment. The breath of relief was fleeting as the manager stepped forward again, fists clenched beneath his tailored suit. "This isn't over," he murmured, extinguishing Valerie's hope as though crushing a flower. He lifted his chin to security, instructing them to stay vigilant. His footsteps echoed like a slow clock, marking a grim rhythm that foretold further battles. Around him, the hall became a stage of simmering silences. Each breath seemed to plead for justice. Valerie, feeling her body tremble, squeezed Ethan's hand again for support. The piano resumed with soft but tense notes, as if accompanying the beat of anxious hearts. A sympathetic elderly guest whispered to his companion, "I never imagined such dignity in one woman." His friend simply nodded, eyes misty, holding a secret that money could never buy. Valerie's aura grew almost tangible, revealing that her inner strength surpassed Crystal's shimmer. In the hall's hidden corridor between opulence and solidarity, Valerie and Ethan's story rose like a torch against conformity's darkness. Marcus raised his cell phone and typed swiftly, his trembling fingers betraying the invisible pressure around him. He issued a curt order. "End service in 5 minutes, prepare the checks." The clinking of glasses flickered like warning signals, and patrons felt the room tremble. Valerie heard the instruction reach each waiter, who swallowed nervously before announcing the closure. "Ladies and gentlemen, our service will end shortly. Please prepare to settle your checks," came the maître's voice, cold as a winter wind. Guests exchanged apprehensive glances. Some stood hastily to leave while others remained, frozen, absorbing every detail. Ethan squeezed Valerie's hand fiercely, as if promising to keep dancing even when the lights dimmed. Valerie felt each passing second's weight, aware that this moment would shape many lives' futures. The piano resumed softer, like a restrained lament brushing soul's edges. Thus the hall sank into a brisk end-of-service rhythm, but the convergence of courage and opulence would echo in hearts eternally. As some guests hurriedly exited, others lingered, seeking a reason they couldn't articulate. An elegant lady, in green velvet, whispered to her husband, "I have never seen such dignity in one woman." He nodded wordlessly, eyes moist, as though he held a secret eclipsing wealth. Valerie, in turn, collected empty plates with slightly trembling hands, watching scented candle smoke spiral into invisible patterns. Ethan remained still, his gaze fixed on Valerie's reflection in the hall's mirrors, seeing in her the hidden strength he longed for. Marcus observed from a distance, arms crossed, biting his lower lip in a blend of remorse and newfound respect. The clinking of cutlery became a mechanical rhythm, each strike thunderous as a distant storm. Valerie felt the apron's sash tighten around her waist like armor forged in silent prayer. The music waned further, mutating into an echo stretching into infinity. And in the final moment before service's end, the question lingered. What would happen when the news of that instant spread beyond the crystal walls? The dining room erupted into reverent silence when Valerie, lifting her chin, declared in a firm voice, "He's just repeating the steps of the therapeutic dance I created." Her words dropped like a bombshell, fracturing the atmosphere of shock. Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief, for he had never heard of a therapeutic dance crafted by someone like Valerie. Patrons froze like living statues, unable to process the revelation. Ethan, gazing at Valerie with radiant gratitude, felt a weight drain from his heart. He was no longer just the boy in the wheelchair, but someone deserving of true recognition. The chandeliers glittered more intensely, reflecting light in every glass and transforming the improvised stage into something sacred. Jazz notes took on a sacred quality, as if each chord proclaimed a new, undeniable truth. Valerie's body trembled with emotion as she recalled teaching children in Houston's poorest neighborhoods. The audience, now split between disbelief and admiration, began whispering furiously, "She created this against all odds?" The revelation struck like lightning, evoking newfound respect for that humble woman. Marcus's face went pale as he absorbed the depth of what he'd just heard. He swallowed hard, feeling the floor tremble beneath him as if the restaurant's foundation had shifted. Across the room, an elderly gentleman in a silver linen suit rose, surprise and a condescending smile mingling on his face. "I wonder why this is only coming to us now," he said in a husky voice, drawing curious glances. Valerie drew a deep breath as memories flooded her mind. The warmth of the dance studio's lights, children learning to guide their bodies to release their souls. She felt the ache of the past when she had to abandon the project after losing Tiffany, her only daughter. Marcus, still stunned, took a few steps back, unsure whether to reprimand or applaud. Ethan straightened in his wheelchair, as if pulling pride from the very air. Murmurs filled the room. "So that explains why Tiffany is doing so well today. She learned to heal through dance." A respectful hush formed again, permitting a shared empathy to grow. Valerie's pain, mingled with pride, blended with the jazz's now warmer tones. As security guards stepped back, sensing the power of that new information, Valerie's gaze drifted to Richard, who watched in stoic silence. He furrowed his brow, trying to understand why the person responsible for something so valuable had remained hidden from the elite for so long. His thoughts traveled back. Picture a small community school, feeble lighting, children timidly smiling as they conquered limitations. The woman standing with Ethan had been the beacon of hope for those kids. Richard swallowed another gulp, his billionaire pride warring with the realization that such greatness had emerged from someone invisible to high society. He took a hesitant step toward Valerie. I didn't know you were that person," he murmured, voice thick with surprise. Valerie felt her stomach clench, recalling silent prayers offered during nights of mourning for her daughter. "I had to step away to survive," she replied, steadying her voice against the surge of emotion. The audience, now in a state of reverence, waited silently for her confession to continue. A medical student dining nearby interrupted, "We need this in every rehabilitation center across the country." The impact of his remark kindled a spark of hope within Valerie that she never imagined possible. Suddenly, the piano was replaced by a solo violin, elevating the scene's dramatic tension. The violin's high notes trembled, mirroring Valerie's uncertainty and the promise of impending redemption. Waitstaff paused every task, unable to ignore the transformation unfolding on the improvised stage. A whisper swept through the tables. "Ethan deserves more than a wheelchair, and she saved so many children." Richard felt a pang of guilt twist his heart as he witnessed the light in his son's eyes. He had never guessed that Ethan's chance for healing and joy lay in the hands of a former dance teacher unknown to him. Manager Marcus, recognizing the moment's weight, retreated toward the kitchen for moral support. Yet some staff exchanged sheepish glances, admitting they had underestimated Valerie. Soft candlelight illuminated her cross pendant, reinforcing the aura of quiet faith guiding her. Valerie, feeling Ethan's breath against her hand, focused on maintaining emotional balance. Every note the violin played seemed to sing the promise that dance could transform not just bodies, but souls. As the violin crescendoed to its final notes, Richard approached Valerie, extending his hand as though offering a new chapter. "I want to revive your project," he announced, his voice softer than she expected. The entire dining room held its breath, feeling the temperature of that transformative moment rise. Ethan beamed, as if an ancient burden had finally turned to dust. Valerie felt her heart racing, faith and doubt entwined. She touched Richard's extended hand, knowing his gesture represented more than a contract. It was a chance to rescue lives. Some patrons rose discreetly, applauding in approval. Marcus, still in the background, watched wide-eyed as if witnessing his entire world collapse. The piano returned, this time in gentle notes that seemed to whisper promises of reconciliation. The former teacher smiled, feeling years of weight lift from her shoulders. She drew strength from silent faith, knowing this dance's purpose would transcend her wildest dreams. Behind the scenes, Nancy Carter, who had arrived quietly, watched every moment with a racing heart. In her hand, she clutched an old envelope containing letters of gratitude and photos of her daughter, Tiffany. Memories washed over her. Tiffany's smile as she took her first steps in dance class, the joy that radiated through the community. Nancy felt tears fall like gentle rain, realizing part of the story was about to be told. She moved toward the dining room door, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal herself. The elderly guest, who had previously praised Valerie, leaned in and whispered to his companion, "Prepare to witness the power of an act of love." Valerie's quiet confidence emanated, fueled by years of struggle and triumph. Ethan squeezed her hand, sharing the foundation of a golden dream in that grip. The promise that the Hope in Dance project would be restored resonated throughout the room. And as candle flames fluttered, Nancy stepped into view, ready to unite past and present in a breathtaking revelation. Silence fell for a heartbeat before Nancy, voice trembling, proclaimed, "Valerie, I'm Nancy Carter, Tiffany's mother." The revelation struck like emotional thunder, tearing the veil of pain. Valerie turned slowly, eyes wide, stomach churning. Nancy extended the envelope toward Valerie, revealing photos of her former student walking confidently. Patrons leaned forward, absorbing a scene that presaged healing and mended scars. Ethan exhaled as if finally seeing the tapestry of connections binding them all. Marcus took another step back, utterly stunned, while Richard discreetly wiped a tear. Candlelight flickered as if celebrating the union of past and future. The piano resumed in soft notes of hope, infusing the space with newfound warmth. Finally, the room erupted into hushed applause, a shower of acknowledgement and gratitude. And the question echoed in everyone's minds, Could the gentle touch of dance truly heal all wounds time left behind? Backstage, the atmosphere was an entirely different world. The kitchen hummed with hushed voices and furtive glances. Chefs clutched knives and utensils, their eyes scanning the dining room as predators eyeing prey. "She just wants attention," muttered Roberto, the battle-scarred sous chef, as he scraped pots with impatience. In the distance, a waitress rolled her eyes and whispered, "Always the same story, half humanitarian, half show-off." Valerie, feeling the chill of envy searing her back, remained silent. Her co-workers watched her with a blend of admiration and resentment, seeing in her the mirror of their own insecurities. The stark white light of the kitchen spotlights collided with the fiery red of the stove flames, creating a visual contrast reflecting the invisible tensions. Valerie gripped her cross pendant against her chest, recalling the all-night prayers that kept her faith alive. Every step she took, even out of the customer's sight, declared her purpose's profound roots. Meanwhile, the piano's muffled sound drifted in like a distant echo of hope. Though back there, backstage, hope felt as fragile as glass about to shatter. As Valerie gathered empty trays, she heard the low rumble of Jeremy, the youngest waiter, muttering, "She thinks she can save the world with dance steps." The mockery came with suppressed giggles, and some staff members chuckled behind counters and curtains. She felt the sting of old wounds reopen, remembering the contempt she faced when leaving her community after Tiffany's passing. Despite the pain, she inhaled deeply, reminding herself that her purpose exceeded any petty judgment. Valerie's breathing hit a steady rhythm, echoing the closing and opening of every pot and pan. In a corner, a cleaning assistant nudged her cart, overhearing murmurs like snakes hissing. Valerie locked eyes with the young woman and offered a gentle smile, silently conveying empathy. In that moment, the unspoken bond between two women who knew suffering spoke louder than any shallow conversation. Yet the wave of whispers only amplified the unease. Why did she have to show up now, stealing the owner's spotlight? The doubt lingered, poised to erupt into conflict. Laurent, the pastry chef, appeared suddenly behind Valerie, his face taut with tension. "Valerie, the staff on bar duty wants to speak with you," he said in a low, firm voice. Valerie nodded, standing tall like an oak weathering storms. The clang of metal utensils on the sink thudded in tandem with her racing heartbeat. She walked toward the makeshift bar station backstage, where Lena, a longtime colleague, held a glass of water, her hands trembling. Lena avoided Valerie's gaze as she spoke. "They're saying you did all this to show off." Valerie closed her eyes for a moment, feeling anger burn like flame consuming shaky foundations. "Not every story fits into 5 minutes, Lena," she replied softly, her steady tone revealing her resolve not to yield. Every syllable echoed through the kitchen like a lash, reminding everyone that this chapter was far from over. Lena met her gaze, chagrined, realizing her doubt could sever bonds of trust. Back in the prep area, the atmosphere felt charged with suspicion. Some chefs, wearing sauce-stained aprons, exchanged worried looks as if the kitchen itself were a battlefield. "She may mean well, but she's threatening our positions," whispered Marcos, the waiter who had once applauded the dance. Valerie heard him as she passed by, but didn't stop. The aroma of spices mingled with the sweet scent of salon candles, highlighting the chasm between backstage's cold reality and the salon's deceiving warmth. She grabbed a damp cloth, wiping a stained countertop, focusing on her task to avoid being consumed by poison. Each spray of water reminded her of resilience. Even amid grime and disdain, silent faith endured. Lifting her head, she caught Roberto's stern gaze, his frown etched with disapproval. It wasn't only words condemning her, stares pierced like invisible daggers. Yet Valerie raised her chin, realizing her inner flame burned brighter than any whisper of malice. The wall clock read 10:37 p.m., signaling the final approach of the shift's end. Marcus's instructions buzzed through some staffers' phones, reminding them to clean everything for the Hope in Dance project inauguration. Valerie's thoughts drifted to that upcoming event, where voices of dissent would have to yield to the power of truth. The clatter of dragging plates mixed with the constant whisper, as if the very kitchen itself struggled to breathe. Valerie inhaled deeply, tasting the metallic tang of tension on her tongue. She wiped sweat from her brow, noticing beads forming small pools. Her colleagues' shallow breaths revealed that the emotional storm had reached them too. Rounding a corner, Valerie found Marcus's distant gaze. He watched her as though analyzing a complex equation, trying to decipher each step. Valerie indicated the hallway exit with a simple nod, determined to finish her shift unshaken. Yet inside, she knew this conflict would swell beyond backstage walls. At the junction between kitchen and maintenance corridor, the sound of a bucket dropping rang out, halting the chorus of whispers. Luca, the dishwasher, had let the bucket slip, his face riddled with panic. "They said they'll hold you until the owner arrives to discuss," Luca stammered, eyes wide with confusion and surprise. Valerie felt her breath hitch but managed, a steady stance as if her body, though tense, enforced calm. Luca backed away, shaking his head as though trying to dispel a disturbing vision. Valerie wiped the remaining water with her foot, lifting her chin as if a ship facing a stormy sea. Each tile groaned under the weight of her emotion, a reminder of past sacrifices. She walked slowly through the passageway, focused on the steps guiding her back to the main dining area. Even surrounded by venomous whispers, Valerie nurtured an inner flame that refused to die. In the distance, the piano's soft notes reminded her that dance and hope lay just beyond the curtain. Passing through the drape separating kitchen from salon, the charged backstage aura dissipated like smoke in the wind. Valerie shook her apron, to release lingering impurities clinging to its fabric. On the other side of the drape, the world felt far away, a mesmerizing blend of beauty and emotional fervor still resonating in the salon. The shift's final moments drew near, but for Valerie, the real battle would never end there. Judging glances and fear still hovered over her head, but she advanced toward the future with the same hope she taught children in every dance step. Stepping forward one last time, she lifted a tray, feeling the weight of stairs melt like dried petals, for her silent faith had ignited a fire no rumor could extinguish. The stage of triumphs and wounds may have shifted, but the hope born from a boy's courage pulsed in her knees, ready to guide her into the next chapter. Valerie walked slowly down the hallway leading to the main dining room, still feeling the weight of every glance backstage. The muffled piano notes merged with the clinking of glasses, a familiar refrain courting hope. Her steps echoed softly, against the polished floor, setting a meditative rhythm. In the entryway, she found HR Director Mrs. Langston, a woman of stern features and probing eyes. "We need to talk," Langston said, her voice heavy with formality. Valerie nodded, her heart tightening, yet her resolve remained unwavering. The contrast between the salon's warm lights and the meeting room's cold glare felt like fire colliding with ice. She inhaled deeply, recalling the silent prayers that had carried her through the darkest nights. When the door closed, the restaurant's noise vanished, leaving only the echo of her racing thoughts. Langston simply watched in silence, as if appraising each nuance of Valerie's weary expression. "You caused quite an uproar," Langston began, folding her arms like a shield. Valerie held her gaze steady, feeling her throat tighten, but maintaining a serene tone. It was necessary to spark empathy and openness. Langston's brows furrowed, her words weaving through the air like blades. "The owner is reluctant. This is an elite establishment. Photos and videos of that dance are spreading on social media. Guests are demanding refunds." Valerie's stomach twisted, yet she stood her ground. "If refunds must be paid, I will cover the cost. But I will not retract what happened." Ethan needed that moment. Langston fell silent, exchanging surprised looks with the woman who had dared flout hierarchy. After a measured breath, Langston offered a chair. "Please sit. I want to understand how a former dance teacher wields such influence over the elite." Valerie sat, clutching her shirt's crucifix, her hands steadied by silent faith. The room seemed to shrink around them, like a shoe tightened on every nerve. Langston tapped her tablet, displaying canceled reservations. Cold numbers that clashed with the moment's pulsing intensity. Diners canceling dinner plans, potential project sponsors reconsidering. Each statistic felt like a blade slicing into Valerie's hope. She looked at the crucifix, feeling faith flicker like a glowing ember. "Every loss is a price for transformation," she murmured. "For without pain, there is no rebirth." Langston absorbed her words as if struggling to fathom their depth. Investors fear staining the brand. They'd do anything to preserve this perfect illusion. Valerie's body trembled, but her spirit remained unbroken, remembering the children whose lives had changed. Let that illusion shatter. Truth is worth more than vanity. Her words hovered, razor sharp, and Langston blinked, caught off guard by the quiet power behind them. Langston shrugged in resignation and rose, circling the meeting room like a cautious predator. "Valerie, you have a gift for uniting people through dance. But the world of the elite doesn't take kindly to provocations." Valerie's gaze dropped, feeling the walls reflect her own doubts. Langston continued. "On the other hand, your gesture has mobilized anonymous donors. Few institutions can boast such engagement so quickly." Valerie's fingers loosened on her lap, as though even the air might betray her. "That is the twist, isn't it?" she said, looking directly into Langston's eyes. "The pain that once consumed me is now the spark reigniting so many hearts." For a brief moment, Langston smiled, seeing a flame that refused to diminish. "Exactly. But know this. You will have to justify every penny to keep this project alive." Valerie raised her chin, ready to face the next challenge. For each word became fuel for her silent faith. Stepping out, Valerie noticed the dining room now pulsating to a different rhythm. Guests began accepting this new reality. She saw curious gazes, lingering expressions of genuine admiration, even encouraging smiles. She inhaled deeply, allowing the piano's soft melody to seep into her chest, infusing her with courage. Across the room, she spotted Richard speaking intensely with a group of investors who had slipped in quietly. She approached, feeling tension buzz like electricity. Upon noticing Valerie, Richard smiled warmly, an expression that weighed hope against fear. "They demand usage plans and detailed reports," he said, handing her a dossier filled with figures and projections. Valerie took the document, feeling expectations' weight etched into each cold ink line. "I'm prepared for every report, every spreadsheet. Dance follows its own logic. Each step reveals a new world." Richard nodded, moved, and gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Meanwhile, Ethan watched everything from the head table, his gaze shining like beacons of urgency. He reached out to Valerie, a silent gesture of gratitude. She moved to his side, each step a silent pact with her own heart. "Dad," Ethan began with uncommon maturity. "Thank you for believing in Issa, Valerie." Richard offered a sidelong smile, surprised by his son's clarity. "My boy, you showed me that life isn't just a gilded surface. There's light in every heart." The room hushed, everyone awaiting the unfolding of a simple but profound scene. Valerie sat beside Ethan, their gazes entwined in a bond of silent faith. "We'll make history together," she whispered softly, for Ethan's ears alone. He nodded, his wheelchair wheels stirring in a small tremor of excitement. A waiter approached discreetly, sliding a phone across the table displaying headlines from online news, "Therapeutic Dance Miracle" and Valerie's bold act of courage. The glow on many faces intensified, as if light had taken on a tangible form of hope. Richard frowned, recognizing that these headlines would attract scrutiny but also solidarity. Valerie felt the phone's weight in her hand, a digital testament to dance's power over invisible souls. "They will stand with us if they see commitment and transparency," she declared with conviction. Richard nodded, heartened by her determination. As the piano resumed gentle, hopeful notes, the entire table sensed that their alliance, built on faith, struggle, and strategy, was the seed of something grand. Cool. Muted light reflected off the marble floor as Valerie's footsteps echoed, warning of her approach. She made her way to the central table where Richard waited beside Ethan. The air felt heavy with unspoken expectations. When he looked up and saw her, his face hardened into an austere outline. Ethan remained calm, yet his large, sorrowful eyes carried a newfound confidence. Valerie's chest tightened as she sensed the billionaire's imposing presence. The contrast between Richard's rigidity and Ethan's tenderness created a nearly tangible tension. Patrons peered from the background in hushed observation, as if the corridor itself were a stage. Valerie inhaled deeply, drawing on the quiet faith that had sustained her since childhood. In the distance, the soft tinkle of a fork sounded like punctuation to a moment of critical importance. Richard lingered in silence, studying Valerie's every detail. The gentle glint of her cross pendant, the slight tremor in her hands, the unwavering determination in her eyes. Then he leaned forward and, in a clipped tone, asked, "Why did you do that without informing me? I assume you have some connection to my son. But did you really need to humiliate him in front of everyone?" His words cut through the air like a blade, eliciting a sharp intake of breath from Valerie. She held his gaze and drew a steadying breath, letting her words form in precise measure. "I simply wanted to give him a moment of joy he's never known," she replied, her voice soft yet imbued with inner strength. Ethan's chest rose as though he were breathing in pride rather than air. Richard's eyes flickered, illuminated by overhead chandeliers that cast shifting lights and shadows across his stern face. In the background, murmurs from the diners rose slightly, like waves gathering to crash ashore. Valerie felt each second stretch, knowing that from this exchange would spring the next step of her mission. Richard furrowed his brow, folding his arms tightly beneath his immaculate suit, revealing his internal struggle in his rigid posture and clasped hands. "You dared to expose my son publicly. That puts our reputation at risk." The word reputation reverberated like a thunderclap, reminding Valerie of her own years of invisibility. She inclined her head in acknowledgement, accepting the gravity of the consequence. "Perhaps your reputation needs redefining because what's at stake is a child's dignity." Her words echoed down the corridor, finding attentive ears everywhere. Ethan grinned quietly. This quiet moment of reassurance was a melody he had long awaited. Richard inhaled deeply, striving to keep his composure, yet the cloud of remorse and paternal love betrayed him. That moment revealed that beneath his vast wealth and power, he was still vulnerable to a son's hope. The tension morphed into anticipation, as if everyone awaited the next play in this match of souls. Richard's hand moved toward the smartphone in his pocket, though he hesitated before drawing it out. Valerie noticed the slight tremor in his fingertips, betraying the vulnerability underlying his authority. She took a step back, giving him room to wrestle with his own conflict. "Dad," Ethan said, his voice calm and imbued with an assurance. "Beyond his 10 years, she gave me light when I was trapped in darkness." The silence that followed went on so long that it seemed to compress the very air in the corridor. Both diners and staff halted, collectively holding their breath as if the fate of the world hinged on a single response. Richard closed his eyes, for a moment, allowing the guilt and paternal love to collide within him. When he reopened them, a flicker of compassion softened his once stern gaze. "Ethan, my intention was never to keep you silent," he murmured, voice thick with sincerity. Valerie felt her heart pound, recognizing that she had reached a harbor of hope, but also immense responsibility. Richard's fingers traced his own chin, as if seeking the right words. I relied on expensive doctors and high-end therapies, but I never managed to bring a genuine smile to your face." This admission of vulnerability was unexpected, shattering the billionaire's armor. The scene took on a cinematic quality. The corridor lights flickered, casting shimmering tears in his gaze. Ethan leaned forward in his wheelchair, eager for a response that would cement his restored faith. Valerie stepped forward as well, gently resting her hand on Richard's shoulder. Dance is more than mere movement. It's healing for both body and soul. It saves not only those who dance, but also those who watch. Her words felt like a sacred chant, spreading calm and wonder among everyone present. The echo of her voice resonated on the walls, creating a hush that swept through the crowd. Richard nodded slowly, signaling his willingness to embrace a new kind of healing. From deeper in the corridor came the sharp clatter of a falling fork, mingled with pounding hearts. Some diners discreetly wiped away tears, realizing that wealth cannot eclipse the need for a heartfelt embrace. Richard raised his chin and regarded Valerie with a mixture of respect and gratitude. "You saved something I didn't know was broken. A father's faith in his own ability to love unconditionally." He exhaled a sigh, and the long-standing chill of anger melted away. Valerie felt her legs quake with joy, yet stood firm, buoyed by the warmth of her silent faith. Ethan beamed, his small teeth glinting like pearls in the soft light. That moment marked a turning point. A simple gesture had triumphed over years of isolation. The entire corridor seemed to exhale, as though an invisible burden had been lifted from every soul present. Richard settled into the wheelchair beside Ethan, moving his hands slowly as though feeling the weight of hope. "I want you to teach me the dance," he declared in a voice both firm and gentle, overflowing with hope. Valerie felt the floor tremble with joy, realizing that his invitation built a bridge between worlds once divided. Behind them, patrons offered discreet applause, recognizing they had witnessed a rare metamorphosis. The piano's gentle notes filled the corridor once more, softer, more inviting, celebrating this new alliance. Valerie smiled at Ethan, sensing the wheels of his chair vibrate with excitement. Richard lowered his head, surrendering to the vulnerability of a child fully expressing himself. The light in each person's eyes revealed that every conflict had been worth enduring. The corridor, once a battleground of tension and confrontation, was now a sanctuary of healing and reunion. As the piano music swelled, the group moved toward the main dining room where guests watched as though the world outside had forever shifted. Valerie sensed each step supported by the strength of generations who had fought, fallen, and learned to stand again in faith. Richard, walking beside her now, offered a tender smile, knowing that mending broken ties required acts of courage. Ethan turned to his mother, voice soft but resolute. "From now on, we dance together, Dad." Richard nodded, touched, as the overhead chandeliers cast dancing reflections on the walls. Spontaneous applause rose in the salon, uniting the wealthy and the unseen in an outpouring of empathy. Valerie felt the warmth of community embrace each heart, realizing that the power of a single dance step could tear down walls of solitude. The chapter closed with a promise. With every rhythm and movement, lives would intertwine in collective rebirth. The dining room fell into hushed reverence when Richard stepped back from the table, his face still heavy but now tempered with unexpected resolve. Valerie's heart raced as she heard his decision. "Arrange a meeting with my attorney and find out the cost to resume the Hope and Dance project." His words rang like a gentle thunder, turning silence into murmurs of shock and restrained admiration. Patrons perched in their chairs raised their eyebrows, exchanging curious looks as whispers spread. "He's actually going to fund it?" Valerie felt her silent faith surge within her chest, blending relief and anticipation. Ethan beamed brightly, his wheelchair wheels trembling with excitement. The chandeliers gleamed in every crystal glass, highlighting the moment as though orchestrated by light itself. Lifting his chin, Richard strode across the room toward Valerie, each step sounding as if it carried a vow. He approached and placed a thick envelope filled with documents in her shaking hands. "I want you to decide where to begin. No budget constraints." Valerie's body trembled, for his gesture meant more than simple funding. It was a declaration of unwavering trust. Patrons offered subdued applause, some with tears glistening in their eyes as they witnessed a poverty of opportunity transform into new promise. Valerie held Richard's gaze, realizing she would never again be just the waitress at Le Coeur d'Espoir. She inhaled deeply, memories of past sacrifices and silent prayers merging with newfound lightness. "I vow to honor every cent, every step, every life in need of healing," she stated, voice choked with gratitude and responsibility. By her side, Ethan leaned forward, tenderly brushing her hand. His eyes shone like beacons, illuminating not only her face but the entire room. "This is for all the kids you've saved, Valerie," he declared with courage beyond his years. A collective sigh of hope swept through the room, each listener's heart catching that same breath. Richard placed a protective hand on her shoulder, feeling the gravity of an act that would rewrite lives. The distant murmur of pots and pans in the kitchen felt like the rumble of imminent reconstruction. Valerie felt faith swell in her chest, transforming into unshakable resolve. Dance would no longer be mere movement. It would be the lifeblood of a community yearning for new beginnings. Meanwhile, backstage, Nancy Carter held the project's inauguration program in trembling hands. She remembered the day Tiffany first danced, an unbridled joy that lit her spirit. Now that same healing power returned through Valerie and Ethan, completing a circle of redemption. Whispers turned to awe as projections lit screens discreetly around the salon. Images of once immobilized children now dancing with radiant smiles. Wealthy diners, businessmen, and executives fell into reverent silence, recognizing their own need for healing through empathy. The stark contrast between the restaurant's luxury and the innocence of the projected scenes made the moment all the more profound. Richard raised his champagne glass in a silent toast, drawing everyone's attention. "To those who believe, hope must be invested. This project is only the beginning." He smiled, looking at Valerie and Ethan as though witnessing stars in alignment. Patricia, an investor present, dabbed her eyes discreetly, feeling the weight of the moment. Holding the envelope of resources, Valerie intertwined her hand with Ethan's, understanding that this gesture meant not just funding, but a pact to transform lives. The piano resumed, playing gentle notes like an audible prayer, cradling the future unfolding before them. Applause, soft yet heartfelt, filled the room like a chorus of new beginnings. At the toast's end, Richard inclined forward and said in a lower tone that carried through the crowd, "Valerie, count on me for anything you need. Make every child feel seen." Valerie felt the world shift, as though each drop of sweat and every tear of suffering had become fuel for this purpose. Ethan's voice rose above the swirl of emotion. "Thank you, Mom." Valerie's smile lit the room like a beacon for lost souls. As lights danced on crystals and tearful faces, she knew this was only another step, the ultimate step to turn pain into hope. Dawn broke over Houston with a gray sky, but inside the community gymnasium, now transformed into a dance studio, an intense sense of light prevailed. A large banner reading, "Hope in Dance Project," fluttered softly above the makeshift stage. Valerie, wearing a simple sweater and comfortable pants, felt her heart pound like the steady beat of a martial drum. Beside her, Ethan observed every detail with eyes reflecting gratitude and realized dreams. As the first guests arrived, neighbors, former students, families of the benefited children, the hall filled with human warmth unmatched by any luxury. In the background, the faint tinkling of coffee cups sounded as a prelude to celebration. Lanterns hung overhead emitted a warm glow, mingling with the scent of wildflowers that discreetly decorated the room. Valerie inhaled deeply, recalling nights of prayer and the silent promise that had brought her to this moment. Every step she took toward the stage was supported by faith in a purpose greater than herself. As the ceremony began, all eyes turned to the head table, where Nancy Carter stood with tear-filled eyes. Beside her was Tiffany, now a physiotherapist and Valerie's former pupil, smiling as she saw her ex-teacher. Richard appeared next, exuding quiet confidence as investors approached to present envelopes filled with donations. The contrast, Between the simple setting and the executive's formal presence created an almost surreal scene. Valerie ascended the stage, her cross pendant gently swaying against her chest, reminding her that grace often arrives from unexpected places. A reverent hush fell over the audience, broken only by collective exhalations. She raised her hands and, for the first time since the project's inception, sensed every judgmental gaze vanish, replaced by curiosity and love. This moment signified not merely a project's reopening but a community's rebirth. Nancy, voice trembling, stepped forward and took Valerie's hand. "I want everyone to know that without you, my daughter might never have discovered her own strength." As she spoke, Nancy revealed a small wooden box containing old photos of Tiffany hobbling on crutches. The audience held its breath at the images, the same girl dancing now with grace healed by Valerie's work. Tears glistened in many eyes and some discreetly wiped them away. Tiffany rose and, with emotion, brought Ethan onto the stage. He, smiling and confident, danced a brief step beside Tiffany, sealing the bond between past and future. Valerie watched, her heart bursting with pride and gratitude. It was the living proof that her sacrifices and silent prayers had culminated in healing. As applause rippled through the hall, a different sound captured everyone's attention. Bare feet stepping on wooden floor beside the stage. An elderly woman wearing a simple dress clutching a carved wooden cross slowly approached. Silence returned because her features were unmistakable. She was none other than Valerie's mother, Olivia Santos, who for years had lived in a distant neighborhood, sustained by quiet faith. Shock rippled through the room like a flash of lightning. Olivia walked to Valerie, tears streaming down her time-worn face. She knelt before her daughter, touching Valerie's face in a gesture filled with forgiveness and love. Guests fell into reverent amazement, witnessing a reunion surpassing any cinematic scene. Richard, surprised, stepped forward and offered his hand to Olivia, acknowledging the mending of a once-shattered family. The moment became epic, mother and daughter sealing a circle of grace that began years ago. Valerie embraced her mother, tightly, each line on Olivia's aged face telling a story of endurance and faith. The voices of the crowd united in a release of relief and joy, as if witnessing a tangible miracle. Ethan, eyes filled with tears, extended his small hand to Olivia, who smiled tenderly and accepted her grandson. The hall seemed to pulse with a melody of reconciliation, each heartbeat resonating like a drum of hope. Richard knelt beside Valerie, wrapped in Olivia's arm, in a gesture symbolizing respect and unity. The piano, now played by a teenager tutored through the project, filled the space with soft, hopeful notes. Nancy rose, microphone in hand, announcing, "This ceremony symbolizes not just the project's revival, but the triumph of hope over pain, faith over darkness." Applause erupted. Tears flowed like gentle rain from hearts once hardened. Meanwhile, Tiffany guided Ethan to center stage, presenting him with a bouquet of lilies. "These are for you, brother," she said, voice quavering with emotion. Ethan accepted the flowers, his eyes fixed on Tiffany, sharing a smile that sealed the continuity of generations. A boy who once cried in silent despair now lived a dream of movement and joy. Valerie stood, knees trembling, and walked to the reunited family, linking the hands of grandmother, mother, daughter, and grandson in a circle, symbolizing complete grace. The crowd rose to its feet in spontaneous ovation, each person eager to feel the story pulsate within their own hearts. Chandelier lights shone more brightly, reflecting tear-streaked, awed faces on the walls. In a final act of celebration, Ethan invited everyone to join a brief choreography, uniting rich and humble in a dance of communion. The echo of footsteps on the wooden floor formed a silent hymn of collective healing. Valerie looked at Richard and whispered, "See how dance brought us all together." He nodded wordlessly, sharing in the moment of total transformation. When the piano struck the wedding final note, the hall erupted in applause and joyous exclamations. The Hope and Dance Project was not merely an initiative, it was a beacon pointing toward breaking unseen chains and mending broken souls. As guests drifted out, a luminous glow lingered, a glow of second chances, Valerie realized that, despite all the pain, her calling had built a circle of grace encompassing not only her and her family, but an entire community, yearning for hope. And as she left the stage with her mother, her son, and her husband, she knew this was not an ending, but the start of a new chapter, one in which the dance would never cease, for every step carried the promise of future transformations. Valerie and Ethan's journey reveals the transformative power born when pain becomes the fuel for hope. Realizing that a simple gesture, like an improvised dance, can shake power structures and unite opposites, reminds us that change begins in small details. How did the life of a nearly invisible former dance teacher become the starting point for healing so many wounds? Do we overvalue the appearance of perfection and forget the worth of silent compassion? Throughout the story, we saw that pain need not remain a burden. It can become bridges of empathy across generations. Each time Valerie lifted her chin to challenge norms, she rewrote not only her own destiny, but also the fate of every child touched by dance. Richard, the billionaire used to controlling the world with money, discovered that true wealth lies in the capacity to love and believe in dreams beyond mere figures. When he realized his son's smile was worth more than any investment, his life changed course. And you, how many times have you let limitations imposed by others silence your own aspirations? In seeking security, have we forgotten to follow the calling pounding in our own chests? Learning that it is possible to rebuild bonds wounded by time and routine demands an intimate dive into our own scars. Valerie's reunion with her mother, Olivia, seemed to seal a circle of grace that began long before that first dance step. Seeing the entire family reunited showed that our legacy is rooted in what we allow to flourish in others' hearts. And if, deep down, we all carry a forgotten mission, waiting to re-emerge when we least expect it, contemplating how backstage, whispers of envy transformed into a chorus of blessings invites us to reflect on the power of our own voices. Our everyday gestures may, without us realizing, sow new possibilities in the fertile fields of other people's lives. The reopening ceremony for the Hope and Dance Project was not merely a symbolic event. It embodied a profound lesson that faith, courage, and empathy walk hand in hand. Witnessing children dancing without fear, adults weeping with gratitude, and investors seeing value in something so essential yet previously invisible, teaches us that true change happens when we embrace vulnerability. Are we willing to strip away certainties and allow the innocence of a dream to show us new paths? How many times have we let fear stall our drive to renew old stories? If this journey touched your heart and sparked in you the desire to view pain with different eyes, we invite you to take the next step. Ask yourself today, how can I sow hope in my own surroundings? If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel, activate the notification bell, and share it with someone who needs to hear this.